Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the left, I'm David Jones.
And I'm Paul Betancourt, in for Gary Polland on the right.
We have Bill White with us. He used to be mayor of Houston, as you all know. I think his name was Alcalde Blanco back in those days. Now, Bill White, who used to be Deputy Secretary of Energy, is now running for the governor of Texas, and we welcome you to the show, sir.
Great to be back here again. And you even brought along Betancourt here, my old buddy.
Well, it's only because y'all get along so well.
And we do, because, Bill, you switched from the Senate race into the governor's race. Tell us about it.
Well, Kay Bailey Hutchison had told me and thousands of other people, probably including you, that she was going to resign to run for governor. And she knew she needed to do that in order to compete effectively with Rick Perry. I'm not a big fan of the governor on governance, but he's a very accomplished politician. Well, she threw in the towel and said that she was not going to resign and run full-time for governor. And I'll tell you what, Paul, I was deluged by people who face a prospect of more years with Governor Perry, and I responded to that.
Did she tell you she was now losing, and therefore it would be a much easier race?
No, I don't think she's told anybody that, but I'll tell you what, I can see some polls, but I think she did say publicly, she said it on a commercial, as a matter of fact, and in a statement, that she was sacrificing her political prospects to serve in the Senate. Well, what does that mean?
Well, Bill, the Senate race is a completely different thing from the governor's race.
Right.
So what are you running on at this point?
Yeah, I want to provide leadership for our state and cut the dropout rate to make higher education more accessible to Texans, to manage state government efficiently. A lot of the state agencies are virtually unmanaged right now, which is necessary to get the most out of our taxpayer dollars. That's a good place to start. And as you know, you'll both know, we do not have a long-term infrastructure plan in place in our state. Mobility funding is up in the air in our state, and we need somebody who can bring people together just to get things done.
Well, let me just say this, Paul. I mean,
Yeah.
Bill probably knows now that he is the head of the Democratic Party of the state of Texas by having announced for governor, something that virtually every Democrat that I've ever talked with in the last year was hoping you'd end up doing. But now it's your burden to get elected, to be the transitional Democrat, to hold on to the Texas House, to be there for redistricting. So you've got to be very excited about leading that charge as well.
Well, I'll tell you, with due respect to people in my party, this election shouldn't be about just one party or who said what to whom in Washington. It ought to be about the people of our state and having competent, effective governance for our state's future. We haven't had that. We have a great state. The people of our state are good, but we're falling behind in education. That's the most important business of state government, and that's what I want to do. I'm proud to be a Democrat, but as you've seen here in City Hall, I don't think governance should be about a perennial war between two parties. People ought to work together to get things done. Texas legislature had done that in the past. That's the way it worked under former Governor Bush, for that matter. But under Governor Perry, things have gotten polarized, and there's too much people talking past each other.
Well, Bill, speaking of that, you've got a situation where many people are not sure how you can win the governor's race because there hasn't been a statewide Democrat elected since 1994, and no big city mayor has ever been elected to a statewide office, period, in the history of Texas from the research I've seen. So how are you going to win?
Well, I'll tell you what, Paul, the first time I appeared on this program, there were questions on how on earth can you possibly win as mayor and all these reasons why I couldn't do it. The fact of the matter is that Texas right now is 30% independent. That was a growing number of people. I think there's a lot of Texans who were not pleased with George W. Bush, and they're not so pleased with Barack Obama right now. They're that big part of the Texas electorate. As you know from working with me here, that's a base of my strength because people want somebody who will shoot straight, who's competent, who may not be the glamour person with all the rhetoric and sound bites, but who works and gets things done. And within this media market alone, the people that will be able to watch this show, if they were wise enough to tune in on this channel, that's a quarter of the state's population. They've been through me with hurricanes and many other things. They know who I am.
Well, Bill, you're very correct, I'm sure, in targeting yourself the way you've described. I have to remind you, though, that there was a guy running for governor in Virginia who pretended that there was no such person as Barack Obama. And he got handed his head on a platter because his base was dispirited because he was trying to be something else other than what was going on in Washington. And now we have this tidal wave, maybe, who knows, that is saying, are these Democrats out of control in Washington? So how do you
It's a bad year for Democrats, that's for sure.
How do you split this baby?
Well, just like I said, I mean, I don't know any Texan who thinks having one of the highest dropout rates in the nation is a good thing. I have not met Texans who think it's a sign of progress that our tuition rates go up every year faster than the ability of citizens to pay. I haven't met anybody in Texas who thinks that it's a good thing that Texas has the highest rates for homeowners insurance in the nation. And that's true Republican, Democrat, Independent.
Now, you mentioned Kay Bailey Hutchinson. Senator Hutchinson has made a cornerstone of her campaign, reform at TxDOT. She says that TxDOT is an arrogant agency, that the public expects the inefficiencies to be cleaned up at TxDOT. Do you agree with Senator Hutchinson on this?
Yes.
And well, she didn't have a financing plan for bringing the transportation dollars up to where they should be, and then they expired in 2012. So you want to fill in that gap in her planning?
Well, I really don't fault her for saying that we need to have a broad consensus. We need to have a bunch of stakeholders involved in it. Everybody knows that we need some money for it. There's many different ways to do it. One mark of my governorship would be bringing people that are respected from all backgrounds in to try to look at what the alternatives and decide which of those alternatives made sense. What we won't do is what Governor Perry did, which is top-down, trans-Texas corridor, toll roads consuming hundreds of thousands of acres of agricultural land, principally to get trucks from Mexico through Texas. Texans are more concerned about how they get from where they live to where they work.
Well, since Governor Perry's pulled the Trans-Texas Corridor plan off the table, what's the answer then, Bill? Because there's obviously a revenue problem already, even in the state of Texas.
Right. Our old dear mutual friend Michael Stevens and I would talk about just this issue, and some of his resources I pulled in to look. I do support having more options for local entities. I think TxDOT should be more decentralized. I think there should be more power in the TxDOT districts to work with the county, to work with regional planning organizations in the cities in the area to come up with mobility plans. And I think that there should be some formulas where there could be some cost sharing with those local governments.
Senator Corona in Dallas says 10 cents increase in the gas tax hasn't been raised since 1991. Local option, is that something you support?
Well, no, he had local option for registration fees that almost passed and got a broad consensus. I generally tend to be in favor of those things where people have local options. When it comes to raising taxes, I think it ought to be on the ballot wherever they were able to do it. But if a county or city wants the option to put that to the ballot of its citizens, I don't see a reason not to allow the citizens to vote on that.
Now, Governor Perry just released today 2 initiatives. One was that, very similar to what it sounds like to you, Bill, he's saying that he would like to see any tax increase have a 2/3 supermajority and then a vote by the public. And he wants that constitutional amendment. Is that something that you would support?
Well, the first thing I'd do is, as governor, and this is the same thing I said when we were talking about our charter amendments, is to manage state government well. I haven't looked under the hood of what's covered or not covered on that. I know that we have many friends who were involved in litigation with Governor Perry about the constitutional amendment that passed.
They're still in litigation on the city. It's due on the other projects too. So go ahead.
Many years ago. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Right. But I'm more inclined to say, show us the fiscal discipline. You're the governor of the state. Don't tell me that we got to protect you from yourself when it comes to increasing expenditures and revenues. But I do believe in the principle that taxes shouldn't go up faster than the ability of Texans to pay.
Should it be constitutionally restricted, though, by population growth? such as what Perry is.
See, there is a constitutional restriction right now
based on income
that is within the state, and so it gets into this, Dave. What is real dollars? What is nominal dollars? What we found in many cases, like during the last 5 years, is the cost of cement and other things that governments had to buy went up faster than inflation. But there may be other places where you can cut. So the first thing I'd do if I was governor, I was look under the hood in the government, in the budget, and I would take a look at where we could find efficiencies, and I would try to abide by the existing constitutional limitations.
Speaking of constitutions, there is one called the United States Constitution, and we have 12 attorney generals in the states who are researching whether or not they can sue the federal government, who is monitoring, who will monitor if this health care reform bill passes, those taxpayers who are not enrolled in a health insurance plan, and tax them if they are not. Is this sort of a secessionist theory of lawsuits, or do you see any merit in it?
Well, those are two different alternatives, I'd say. The first of all, that person has a right to petition, file a lawsuit for whatever, and I'm not one to criticize somebody who files a lawsuit. Just, it's a free country, and that's our legal process. People can express themselves. On the merits, I taught con law at one time, or part of con law, and I think it's pretty questionable. I hope taxpayer funds aren't going to be used for it. That's separate and apart from the issue of whether or not somebody agrees with the health care plan or not.
And, well, Bill, but on this issue, I think most Texans would strongly disagree that the Nebraska compromise, the Cornhusker kickback, even in Nebraska, is very unpopular. So why should not the state of Texas stand up and say, we don't want a special deal on health care for one state and the other 49 are left out?
No, that's a different issue than this issue of whether you have the constitutional power. Listen, I'm against unfunded mandates. And if you could just sue the government to end the unfunded mandate, that'd be great. But that, under the Interstate Commerce Clause, the federal government can mandate quite a bit. On this issue about whether one state should get a special deal, I think it's just flat wrong.
Now, Obama gave his presidency a rating. President Obama said he was a B+. Would you agree?
Oh, gosh. I'd say it's really too early to tell. I mean, I think I do not like the fact that the federal government is spending so much more money than it takes in. That just goes way against my grain. I think that the president has done a lot to turn around the perception and the support of this nation abroad, and on that, he deserves a plus. I sure will be listening to the State of the Union address to see whether the president has concrete plans to significally reduce that deficit.
Now, of course, you don't want to be sucked into Paul's game of nationalizing the governor's race, But so there are other big issues.
How about localizing the mayor's race? Another story
that we could do. You will be, if you're governor, you will be sort of in charge of what Representative Madden of Plano says is a criminal justice system with the most punitive legislation of any state in the nation. You have firsthand experience as mayor of having seen of crime lab failures. We now know the fingerprint science at HPD is flawed. You've seen DNA release people from prison and from death row. Do we care about justice in Texas?
Sure.
How prove it?
Every day you'll find, and I mean you're down there, you have people who've violated the rights of victims, done things that have created tremendous wounds in the security of individuals. Penalties are a deterrent to crime. Maybe we disagree on that, but I sure think they are.
I mean, do you think Rick Perry is interested in justice? He's a guy that purged a committee that was looking into the arson science that may have executed an innocent man. I mean, I'm asking whether the leadership of Texas is interested in justice.
I'll tell you, and it's not just people in my party, or I consider myself to be pretty hard-nosed when it comes to crime, okay? And not real sympathetic. I'm a lot more sympathetic to victims than criminals. But I read some of the background on that forensic science, and I think that action did a lot of harm in causing people to question whether or not the outcome was preordained. I would tend to listen to the people I put on commissions and listen to them very seriously. I don't think any Texan wants an innocent person put to death.
So is it time for a moratorium on the death penalty?
No.
No.
And Bill, you made some good comments about the spending at the federal level.
Right.
And because obviously we're in a situation where we're having unprecedented deficits at a federal level.
Right.
Texas, under Governor Perry, has managed to maintain a pretty good balance sheet through this recession. So how would your governorship be different?
Well, a pretty good balance sheet, it depends on how you do the math. I mean, if it weren't for the stimulus funds in the last budget, they used $2.5 billion of stimulus funds just for regular operating expenses. I'll tell you how I would be handling the situation different today. Governor Perry's budget projected that sales taxes beginning October 1, this last October 1, for the next 24 months, would go up compared to what they were in the 24 months prior. Well, that's not going to happen. I mean, in October and November, they were down by 13%. And what I've been doing in the city, and what I would do as governor, is to bring some of the best managers in the state in and take a look at the operations of each state department to see what contracts can be renegotiated downward, how the workforce could be downsized through attrition without compromising services, to really manage state government the way that many companies in our community and throughout Texas are being managed. I will tell you, I doubt whether there's been any change in the burn rate of state government over the last 60 days compared to what they budgeted, even though we know that the revenues are not going to be there.
Now, we know there was a burn rate in the city of Houston's budget expenditures, but Mayor Parker, when she was on the campaign trail, was quite critical, actually, of the budget that you had passed in city government. Made many statements about the fact that she felt like that there was going to be a $100 million budget shortfall. Is she right? And will she come out in the the city address and say it?
She never criticized. She appeared at a council table, never said once to me that we should change a city budget. Well,
on my radio program and others and television, she has been, obviously she was critical, Bill. You know that.
No, I mean, I'm telling you a fact, and people that she was an elected official, and not once did she ever communicate to me one solitary thing that she would have changed in the budget. That doesn't mean that she didn't have some views, but I would say the same is true with others I heard criticize the budget. The fact of the matter is the city of Houston right now has over double the cash on the balance sheet that it did when I had in office, that we built up surpluses for 4.5 years, that many times, well over a dozen, in open city council chambers, I said that we were going to use those surpluses this year and next year in order to pay for the new police that we were adding in the new firefighters contract, and that's what we've done.
Now, one of the things that's still under litigation at the city is a spending, effectively a revenue cap.
Right.
And 5 years after its passage, it's up at the Supreme Court because the city is saying that Bruce Hotze doesn't have standing to even bring the suit. This seems to be at odds with your earlier comments in the interview here that the public has the right to go and sue, like the Attorney General on the health care issue. And you've only got two choices at state government. You can either try to cut spending, or you have to raise taxes. And by fighting the Proposition 2 in the city of Houston, it would indicate that we're not from the Mayor White's perspective, through maybe a possible Governor White administration, that you're not going to be supporting any type of revenue or spending caps.
No, I've supported a revenue cap, and there was something that we both supported that I wrote by hand, which limited the growth in property taxes. And in fact, it required us to go to the voters, which I did once, to get the authorization of the voters to have more property tax revenue to pay for policing crime. On the issue of standing, one of the issues when you go to court, when attorney generals go to court, the first issue that a judge will decide is whether or not that person has standing to sue. But that doesn't prevent them from going to the court. It's just a question of not everybody can walk in and sue anybody for anything.
Well, you're the son of two school teachers.
Yeah.
And one of your who could have been an opponent, Mr. Schiffer of Fort Worth, said after the big meeting at your house, where
which we'd like to hear more about, by the way.
Yeah, who was present for that? C-SPAN.
Did you give C-SPAN at least an hour, Bill? That's what we want to know.
Schiffer says that he's happy to have you as governor in his place, but that you better do well because we're approaching third world status, and we've got so many kids that are, where English is their second language, where they're living on food stamps. Representative Eisler of the Woodlands says we need $2.8 billion more for those kids to catch up. So are we really, in reality, then talking only about cutting spending in the state of Texas?
No. I think we need to invest more and more effectively where it is effective in education. And examples of that would be some things that we've done here in Houston. Our summer opportunity sessions allow kids to go to elementary school voluntarily during the summers for enrichment. And we've taken kids that in 5 weeks, for $1,500 a kid, we've taken them from 40% of the national average on test scores to 60%. Early childhood education, pre-K education, wherever it's tried, in Oklahoma would be an example. It's really helped those kids succeed in school. And then we need to bring back the dropouts, because in the long run, the more dropouts there are, the poorer we all are. A person who drops out of high school has half the lifetime income of somebody who gets a high school diploma. Sure. And when they get that high school diploma and they make more income, then they can spend more money in the community. They can save more.
Bill, let's say conservatives and liberals agree on that point. Now, the question is, where are you going to get the revenue? Because one of the insidious problems with the state budget has been the fact that as property taxes have gone up, and they've about doubled in the last 10 years in any jurisdiction in the state of Texas, including Houston and anyone listening, watching our program tonight, where are you going to get the revenue, because property taxes are tapped out?
And you're endorsing that we need new revenue? Is that what
I'm just asking because I want to know, because you either have two choices. You either get the revenue or you don't.
Well, the first thing you do is to try to make things more efficient. And I do not know, Paul, all the answers, but I do know that if you get good people, and people like yourself, I mean, that may not agree across the political spectrum together in this state, and you set goals, and you know that educators are going to be held accountable for results, and people will know that barriers to higher education will come down, that we can figure out a way to pay for this in Texas.
One last question, Bill, on the interlocking relationship between state and local government. The Houston pension funds, classic example. We think they're billions of dollars that they're unfunded. Is the state going to have to bail out pension plans like Houston and others eventually?
No, I mean, my gosh,
I mean, $1 billion here and $1 billion there is real money.
Okay. I cut the pension liabilities within a period of months by over $1 billion. You're one of the people who supported the pension reforms.
Absolutely, right.
Put it to a referendum. We had 2 cuts in the pension benefits in municipal, one big cut in police. And I've said on numerous occasions we ought to do more, but we were shackled, handcuffed by state law and what we could do with the pension funds. The bigger issue...
Oh, I agree. That's my follow-up point.
The bigger issue is going to be the Texas State teachers' retirement system and all the money that's gone to these private equity firms as they shifted from stocks and bonds to the private equity firms, many of which have ties to political contributions. When those investments are marked to market, that's going to be a real crisis.
We have to close with your opposition in this governor's primary is a guy whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce, but maybe you can tell us who he is and how you compete with a fellow who I understand can spend so much money. And you, of course, we know are a pauper and will be looking for public funding, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Well, I'll tell you what, Farouk Shami is the individual's name.
Even the Republican knew that answer, Dave, but go ahead.
Farouk Shami has said he will spend an awful lot of money. I think from what we've seen, he spent millions. He spent at least 3 or 4 or 5 million already on this race. And, it's a free country. Somebody can file to compete in the primary.
And he's running against you, and I saw you in a picture cutting a ribbon at some opening of his... can't you guys work this out?
No, I mean, that is to say, I think I have the support of the public, but Mr. Shami has certainly a right to run, and I just hope that he'll compete factually and fairly.
About $15 million later in the Democrat primary, we're going to find out, Bill White, and maybe another $35 million in the Republican primary. We'll find out who you're running against, too.
There you go.
Thanks a lot for being here.
It's great to be with you.
Good luck to you.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all for being here and watching the show tonight. You can also see more about tonight's show with a follow-up discussion with Paul and I by visiting HoustonPBS.org. So check that out. Until next time, get informed and get active.